Good evening. Welcome to another conversation at the table. I am Chad Bresson. I'm the lead pastor at the table of Los Fresnos. So how's your Wednesday? How'd your Wednesday go? We had a bit of excitement here. I told you yesterday about the cats. So we had a mother cat wander into the yard and delivered 5 little kitties, and they are still there. Again, don't know where they came from. Have no idea where that cat. I kind of think I'm figured out maybe where she came from, but still don't know. But anyway, get in the car to head off to a meeting, and I look in the rearview mirror on Highway 100, and I see a little furry thing out the back. This is up 100. And I was like, that looks like one of those little kitties. So I do a U-turn around the railroad tracks. I go back. I start. Yeah, sure enough, it was one of the little kitties. Had parked herself in the, I don't know, wheel well something. She was up somewhere in the car chassis. And so that was our excitement, saving the little kitty from 100. By the way, there were birds circling. As I finally got to the kitty, they beat me to the little kitty. And that little kitty was fearful the birds were going to get her. So anyway, that's my claim to fame today. I saved a cat. So that's our life. So how's your life? What's going on in your life today? Please leave your prayer requests here on our Facebook page. Tonight is going to be a little different. This is more tonight of an open letter. An open devotional for a friend of mine. And this friend is going to remain unnamed. You're going to understand why in a moment. But I thought we would take some time to think about friendship and life and what happens between friends and the meaning of that. And I thought it would be good to do this because I know there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of angst in our society right now. Stress levels are up. I don't know if you've seen any of the statistics or read any of the stories, but stress levels, again, it's not an accident right now that we are living out the George Floyd moment on the back end of our COVID-19. Stress levels are just high. And there's a pastor friend of mine here in town. He was telling me he's had more meaningful conversations in the last 12 weeks than he's ever had in his pastoral ministry, and the same is true with me. I hear your prayer requests, and we have those conversations. I understand it. So I'm going to say this out loud. If you are feeling stressed, please reach out to the table. Reach out to someone you know and love. And if you're watching this and you need somebody you need to talk to, please private message me. Send me a message and we'll have a conversation. We'll get together. But that's what I'm here for. That's what we're here for. That's why the table exists. That's why any number of these communities of faith exists around town. You're not alone. You don't have to go through this angst alone. We will work together to figure things out. And if I don't have the answers, we'll certainly find others who do. But that's what we're here for. And that's, again, that's what my friend who mentioned that he's had more meaningful conversations. That's what he's here for. Meaningful conversations. COVID has affected all of us. And that includes those that don't think of it as big a deal as some others. It's still affecting us in all different sorts of ways. And so if you're watching this, you've been affected in your own way. Everybody has been affected, and everybody could use a little gospel to speak into. However it is that this whole COVID crisis and even the George Floyd moment has affected us. Let's handle this stress together. Tonight's subject, though, and a different kind of a stress affecting a friend of mine right now. I received a letter from a friend yesterday who is going through a very difficult time. And it's not just him, but his family. It is health related. It's not good news. And as I sat at my computer today thinking about how I would respond, I thought it would be good to say these things out loud. because all of us need to hear these things, because we all have people in our lives who are having difficulty right now. And so there are some good things for us to say in these moments. Now, on some level, there's nothing I can say. Nothing I can say for a moment like this. And in many instances, it's just good to be quiet. But I'm not going to say the ailment. I'm not going to say who. Some of you that know me close, you're going to wonder. And that's okay. You're going to continue to wonder. Privacy matters. And so we're going to keep it that way. At the same time, we can all listen, we can all learn, we can all pray. Not just for my friend, but for others we know who are going through some very difficult times. So the first thing I want to say, especially for my friend, is there is great comfort in providence. And you mentioned in your letter, you talked about providence. And I grew up in a context in which providence and God's providence, the idea that God controls all things, it's a prized idea. We talked about it as God's sovereignty. And we talked about it, we preached about it, we taught about it. It is part of who we are. The idea that God is in control. It was R.C. Sproul that taught us there are no maverick molecules. That all the molecules are owned and controlled by God. At the same time, though, over the years, I have become convinced, and I've come to believe, that God's providence is incarnate. And a lot of times I think when we talked about God's providence, that went missing. The idea that God's providence is incarnate is something we didn't talk about much. God being in control was a bit of an abstract. And we would whip it out. And again, for good reason. We experienced this together when people are going through difficult situations, to remind ourselves that God is in control. And I know you have family members, I have family members that when things got bad or things were not going the way that we thought life should go, we reminded us, and we took comfort in that, and that's okay. At the same time, as we live that out through the rest of our lives, I came to think that was more of an abstract and that we needed something more. That view of providence tended to be arbitrary. We were always told, and the pop phrase was, God said, the pop phrase out there, big thing in the 70s, right? God said it, I believe it, and that settles it for me. And there was even a song, I think Gaither had a song. God said it, I believe it, and that settles it for me. And so we were, those of us that grew up in the context of God being in control and God being sovereign, and we were always told, oh, you can't say that, it's, and you were there with me when we heard this, you can't say that, God said it, that settles it, doesn't matter what I believe, right? Right? That's what we heard. Okay, first of all, that there's something true to be said there. Nothing, when God says something, that does and should settle it. But having that as a worldview, I found for myself at least not helpful, or at least not giving us the entire picture of who God is. Tended to be an arbitrary God, and tended to put God's sovereignty in some sort of an abstract and arbitrary way. That view of God's providence, I came to believe, wasn't all that biblical either, because it didn't give us the whole picture. You see, God doesn't interact with us that way. God took on flesh. God came to feel with us. God came to hurt with us. God came to spend time with ugly me. And God cares. God cares to the point of taking on flesh. God cares to the point of taking his arms and spreading them out. And he cares to the point of becoming a son who walks with us in the moment to the point of dying for us. And that's what he did. He came and he shed real blood for us, for these moments. So that's the first thing. Yes, God is in control, absolutely. But that God has flesh and blood, and he loves you. absolutely loves you. And he died for you. He died for what you're going through right now, what your family's going through right now. The very same God that is in control, that God is yours. Yours. That God is yours, and you are his. And so that God who took on flesh comes and he sits next to you. Yes, he's in control. You know how you know he's in control? Because of who's sitting next to you. He took on flesh and blood, and then he comes to you with arms and hands and hugs and warmth for you. He is that for you. He sits where you're sitting right now with you, and he's telling you that he loves you. You know, that God who incarnated himself, and you're starting to hear this from me. He incarnated himself in a church. He incarnates himself in a family. A church that loves you, a family that loves you, a wife that loves you, kids that love you. They love you, and they love you, and they love you, and they love you. That's Jesus for you right now, today. And it's going to be Jesus for you tomorrow and the next day, all the way until you see him face to face. You see, Jesus comes for you, and Jesus is for you with 98.6 degree warmth. That's something I think we weren't told, but you need to hear it. And I'm sure you already believe it. And I'm sure you're already experiencing it. God's in control, but he comes and he meets you right where you are right now through people that love you, through a church that loves you, through a family that loves you. The second thing I want to say kind of relates to the first, because you're to blame for the way I'm thinking about some of this right now. I can say that. The second thing I want to say is few people taught me more about empathy. And that's the truth. The very empathy I lacked, the very empathy that was lacking in my theology, the empathy that tended to be lacking in the way I pastored, you were there to challenge me. You have challenged me on those things, and you probably will continue to do that. You challenged me on being too academic. You had empathy. And you showed me what it meant and what it means to be people-oriented. There isn't a day that goes by now in which you're not present somewhere in what I'm doing and some conversation I'm having, some feeling I'm having. Empathy. Again, the God that is in control is a God who is empathetic. And you did that for me. And you challenged me on that. Again, not a day that doesn't go by in which you're not present in something I'm doing. And you may be sitting there thinking, that's probably not a good thing. No, I'm serious. I still struggle with empathy. You can go ask Emily. She'll probably say, yeah, he had an empathetic problem tonight. But you taught me what it meant, what empathy looks like, what it means. You've been Jesus to me. A God-given model of what empathy looks like and should look like in the pastorate. So thank you. The third thing I want to say, and this is also tucked in underneath what we've been talking about, and that's this. When there was a point in your life in which you realized you were stuck with me. You know what? You loved me. You loved me unconditionally. You loved me unconditionally, and you understand there are very, very few people on earth that I can say that about. You're among the handful. You loved me. An unlovable kid, an ugly kid with, you loved me warts and all, and I had them. You taught me what it means to love the unlovely because you were loving me when I was unlovely. I still am. I read this today and thought of you in this light. While we were still helpless, comes from Romans, you're going to recognize this. While we were still helpless, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For rarely will someone die for a just person, though for a good person perhaps, someone might even dare to die. But God proves his own love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Now, you haven't died for me. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Christ died for you, Christ died for me, and you understood that in a way in which you were able to reach out, and in the same way, even though you didn't die for me, you loved the sinner. While I was a sinner, while I was unlovely, you loved me anyway. You love me anyway, just like Jesus has done for the two of us. So tonight, I know the news is not great. I know you have fears. I read it. I know you have fears. I know, though, that this God who is in control is incarnate. And he stretched out his arms and he died for your moment. This moment right now. And again, you know how I know that Jesus died and he's with you right now? Because of who's sitting next to you. I know who's sitting next to you right now. And you know who's sitting next to you? It looks like your wife, but it's Jesus. It's Jesus. He's with you. He's feeling it. He's feeling it with you right now. He's grieving with you right now. He's holding your hand right now. He loves you. And he has you. He promised. That's our conversation at the table tonight. What I've said for my friend is true for all of us. Every single night. It's why we get on here and we do these conversations at the table. It's why I kind of like doing it in the evening, because it's when we take stock of what our day has been like. And for my friend and for others, it hasn't been that great. But Christ died for us when we didn't deserve it. And that's why we can lay our head on our pillow at night and go to sleep. Because whatever we face, whatever we've done, he forgives us, he loves us, he graces us, he gives us mercy. He does it all for us. And he's going to do it again tomorrow, even though we don't deserve it. I deserve something totally different than this. I don't deserve any of this. But he does it because he loves us. And the grace that we are given, the grace that he gives us, we're to give to somebody else. So tomorrow, even as I'm doing my own battles and as I'm trying to figure out, even as I'm trying to learn grace, there's going to be a time tomorrow in which I'm in a situation in which I need to give somebody else grace, even though they don't deserve it. And I do that because I don't deserve grace. That's the rhythm of the Christian life. So we grace because we have been graced. Rest in Jesus tonight. Jesus loves you. Jesus has you. He promised. Have a great night.